maybe a bit of a wait. Very warm welcome to the 19th Job and Skill Insights webinar on staying competitive with new mindsets. I'm Jia Tao and your moderator for today. Together with me is Matthew, and we are from the Skills Development Division at SkillsFuture Singapore. Right, what we at SSG do is to provide all Singaporeans with the opportunities to develop their potential throughout their lives. We believe that the skills, passion, and the contributions of each and every individual Singaporean will drive Singapore's next phase of development towards an advanced economy and a more inclusive society. Regardless of which point you're at your life, you can be sure to find a variety of resources to help you attain skills mastery and make informed decisions to expand your skill sets for professional and career development. So before we start, allow me to go through a few administrative details. The entire webinar will take about 50 minutes. During the webinar, attendees are muted by default to avoid electronic feedback and interference. However, you can post your questions anytime by using a Q&A function on your screen. If you see any questions by other attendees that you would like to have answered, you can also upvote these questions, and we'll do our best to answer these questions live. If we are unable to answer these questions during the session, we will definitely answer them and address them after the webinar and send it together with the slides and recording to all of you. Yeah, the speaker will be speaking for about 30 minutes, followed by about 15 minutes of Q&A. So this webinar session will be recorded and published on my SkillsFuture portal, SSG's LinkedIn page, and YouTube channel. The slides will also be sent to all of you via email. Right, our speaker today is Mr. Calvin Chu, Managing Partner of Eden Strategy Institute, a strategy consulting practice that drives sustainable advantages in the areas of social innovation, systems transformation, corporate social partnership, shared value business models, sustainable finance, and impact assessments. Deeply passionate about the interplay between business and societal impact, Calvin helps organizations in the healthcare, education, emerging technologies, and industry sectors achieve economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Today's topic on staying competitive with new mindsets cannot be more timely as we approach phase 3 of the COVID-19 reopening. While we are working towards containing and eventually overcoming this virus, this new norm in which we work and live is likely to stay. And what will set individuals and enterprises apart is a brand new mindset. So without further ado, let us welcome Calvin, who will share some key qualities and skills that will help us navigate the future of work. Over to you, Calvin.
Thanks very much, Xiao, Matthew, and hi everyone. Very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much, SkillsFuture, for having me today. So maybe just before I start, I'll point you all to my contact details below. I'm very happy to stay in contact with all of you. It's very nice to see so many people interested in this topic today, a topic very close to heart for me as well. So let's maybe start off with a brief introduction about the company. I'm coming from Eden Strategy Institute. We focus on social innovation as a strategy consulting firm. And what we work on is what we call transdisciplinary business systems innovation. So what this means is that we actually work across multiple disciplines, and skills therefore become very, very critical to us. We, as Jia Tao mentioned, we focus on creating economic value from solving societal challenges. And what we do this, it's across all countries, many different industries as well, working with governments, multilateral organizations, corporations, social enterprises, and nonprofits. Here are some examples of the few innovations that we have helped to usher in. And across the time, to be able to launch some of these innovations, we've actually had to acquaint ourselves with a wide variety of expertise, skill sets, and mindsets as well. To give you a bit of a flavor, here are 10 core skills that we've identified as quite critical, in our case, for business system innovation. Firstly, when we do any work, it will typically start off doing statistical analysis, looking at which are the important challenges we really do need to solve and focus on. After the diagnosis process, it goes into engaging with business to understand intelligence of what they are likely to do, what they are likely to need, what companies are really in need of. With that white space, we then go into conducting ethnography. So this goes into the lives and hearts of many consumers that we help to support. It goes into a design process where we uncover the use cases, and then after that, we will engineer some of these propositions. These are brought to market, but first through a validation process. And then after that, we will lead into business planning. So a lot of the finance skill sets, market sizing type skill sets will come in. We then need to establish a strong business model and a strategy to go to market. before building out actual partnerships and relationships in the market. With that leads us into sourcing for 3P partnerships, funding, customers, and grants, and then of course to make sure that all of that work actually does create some impact. We also conduct impact assessment. So this hopefully gives a bit of a overview as to what it takes to be able to bring some of these innovations to market. Along this journey, there are not only many hard, tangible skills, but also many human systems and soft skills, if you will. But more importantly, there are also many mindsets that we found to be most successful. So these are just a quick overview as to how we go about it. For my sharing today, I will be really focusing on what are some of the key mindsets. Before that, let's start off more broadly with some of the jobs and skills most desired in Singapore. This is the most recent data from LinkedIn across 2020. And on the left, you will see the top trending jobs in Singapore. On the right, you will see some of the top trending skills in Singapore. So this is just to put it out there, get the elephant out of the room, some immediate opportunities for learning as well as for skills. You will see that across these categories, they are not, while we read a lot about technology skills, and absolutely that's very important, you will see also that there's in a way something for everyone. On the right side, you will see that skills-wise, there are skills relating to project management, all highlighted in that reddish color, technology certainly, but also customers, skills, and finance. At the same time, many of these customer set skills, finance skills are themselves also changing. And in a couple of slides, we'll see how they're evolving as well. From a macro perspective, I think we all know about many of the disruptions that are accelerating increasing in complexity and skills, in scale. There's of course disruption because of geopolitics, international trade, of course, climate issues, technology disruption. So these are all things that we're reading about all the time. But at the same time, these also signify opportunities for companies and for us individuals as well. You'll see here, as I just mentioned earlier, this is World Economic Forum data. On the left, you will see the job families that have classically been strong: engineering, marketing, information technology, human resources, and so on. And on the right, you will see how there are new destination jobs that these are evolving towards: cloud computing, engineering, people, and culture. Now, specifically, I mentioned before that the jobs in, for example, marketing, in human resources will stay. It's just that they will change. We have seen even right now, of course, many of these destination jobs are already here in Singapore. Full stack API development, DevOps, AI, cybersecurity, cloud support, different kinds of API engineering, for example. These have already been here, many good jobs. At the same time, we see that new jobs, for example, data analysis infused into engineering. We see customer journeys, customer analysis infused with digital customer journeys, user insights and experience now infused with big data, as well as domain-specific emerging skill sets like sustainable finance, carbon market analyst type jobs, climate scientist jobs within that space, 5G engineering jobs coming about soon, as well as even if you pick another, for example, agriculture, you will see that plant scientists, agronomists, aquaculture specialists, these are all new jobs that are coming about. So we're pretty excited about this. I think there's no doubt that there will be interesting new developments from a skills and job standpoint. And companies have also been aggressively taking advantage of this. Internationally, you see, of course, the likes of Walmart and Amazon pushing hard to reskill workers. But what we're quite pleased to see is that even in Singapore, some of our leading companies have also taken significant investments to invest and in the future from a workforce standpoint. So you can see many names here that are doing so. I guess the question is not whether there will be jobs or whether there's going to be reskilling that's important, but when reskilling, when you are thinking about investing your time, resources, and energy, where will your skills in the future be needed? Computerization is coming about. I think many of us are concerned about that. And how will the future of work fundamentally evolve? I'd like to very briefly introduce this very seminal study. It's from 2013, it's some time back, but even till today, some of the leading economists in the world are still taking reference from this. This is an Oxford study from these two academics called Frey and Osborne, which did this paper outlining the technology and the impact of technology on different job families. And they've identified three key aspects that computers have difficulty really taking over or substituting for human labor. On the right, the first is around perception and manipulation. Second is about creative intelligence. And lastly, is about social intelligence. these three aspects, when you can perceive things, computers can, I guess, look at pattern recognition, especially from visual imagery, very, very well now. But when it comes to more complex kind of imagery, understanding the sense making, as well as physical manipulation of fine parts, creative intelligence, the human endeavor of creativity and expression, as well as, of course, people to people, social intelligence. These are things that will continue for the long view to be an area that we can continue as humans to be able to add value to. Based on this, the study identified 700 jobs. This is still in the US that are most at risk and least at risk of computerization. On the left, you will see some jobs at highest probability of computerization, telemarketing, even mathematical technicians, because computers can easily repeat this, text preparation, and so on. And on the right, you'll see some jobs which are at the lowest probability of computerization. So things like recreational therapists, we might not think about this, or occupational therapists, but in fact, this is a very human-to-human effort. You probably don't want a machine to manipulate your joints, for example. Orthodontists and prosthetists, for example, it's very fine motor skills, as well as other kinds of mental health, which is very social in nature. So you see that in the US, there are some work here, and I guess the question you will be all wondering about is what's the case here in Singapore? Last year, we did a study. It's the name of the study, and it's freely available online, is called COVID-19 and Workforce Resilience in Singapore, where what we had done was, within Singapore's entire workforce, we basically examined two key factors to try to understand how a new normal for jobs in Singapore will look like. On the vertical axis, we created a score for teleworkability, which is about how easy the job is to be done remotely. And on the horizontal axis, you will see there is a scoring that we had done for human interaction. And we applied these scores onto all the major SSOC categories, the job categories here in Singapore. And this helped us to identify that there are almost 220,000 jobs, for example, with low human interaction and high teleworkability. So this is your your top left-hand corner. This will be jobs like stationary plant and machine operators, assemblers and quality checkers, numerical and material recording clerks, general and keyboard clerks, as well as other clerical support workers. And there's still 200,000 of them here, as well as another 880,000 jobs that are medium in both teleworkability as well as in human interaction that could be at some risk of disruption. So for those of you who are looking at different coming from different kinds of job sectors, this is something that could be helpful for you as you are planning for the future. In some ways, we are also very grateful while doing the research to just really notice that actually our own host here, SkillsFuture, has also been very forward-thinking in helping to map out many detailed skills frameworks for 34 sectors in Singapore. You'll see a whole range of different skill sets that they have defined for us. And they've also gone to the extent of creating this map of critical core skills, 16 softer skills developed and validated by 122 attendees across 79 organizations across different sectors of things that are important. So the good news is that many of these skills, if you look at it, creative thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, customer orientation, digital fluency, communication skills, and event skills and things like that, these are actually skills that, in our opinion, can be learned. I think there are many schools, there are many practices, there are exchanges, there's mentorship, there's many of these skills that even softer skills, critical core skills, or skills that help you to build future skills that in fact can be acquired. So we are quite happy about this, really quite reassured. At the same time, if you look globally though, there are another 16 21st century skills that the World Economic Forum had identified. And of these, I like to really point your attention to these 5 that I've highlighted in red here: curiosity, initiative, persistence or grit, adaptability, and leadership. Now, of these 5, even the World Economic Forum considers them character qualities, and we like to call them character qualities as most vital to organizational and personal success. For those of you who are, could be educators, some of you are managers or business owners, you will probably see, as we do as well, that when you have a worker, regardless of their academic background or what skills they may have, if their curiosity is high, if they take initiative, if they're willing to lead, never give up, if they're willing to change to circumstances, these are really powerful success factors. And these are the 5 that I'd like to spend the most time on today. The challenge is really that, we call them character qualities as if it's a salient factor, as if it's something that's inborn. And if you have it, you are born with it. Otherwise, you don't have it. But what I would like to suggest is that with the right motivations, the right kind of training, we can intervene effectively to instill some of these character qualities, even among adults. So what are we doing in schools? Here's a range of interesting global approaches that we've identified to hone some of these qualities in schools, using, for example, open-ended inquiry to foster curiosity, rewarding just partial steps and progress rather than a final answer, as if there's one answer in life that there really isn't. Rewarding guesses, for example, to inspire people to be even more curious. If I jump around a little bit, you will see that, let's say, grit is interesting. Grit is one of these things that there's a famous psychologist, Angela Duckworth, that talked about this concept of grit as one of the major determinants of life success. And for grit, how do you actually foster this? In schools, for example, you could make people go through more competitive activities, get people used to sometimes losing, and still not giving up. Putting in, this idea of, just effort is more important than rewarding or praising outcomes. Practicing healthy conflict, using rankings and leaderboards to know that it's okay. There's a pathway. I might not be at the top all the time, but there's a pathway for me to go. And these are many of the different, interesting, proven approaches taken in schools to be able to deal with this. We call them instructional methods, or in schools we call them pedagogies, as the way you will teach children. But at the same time, what about adults? Adults may not take very well, and how do we actually focus on helping adults acquire some of these mindsets? So we've done some research for the last 7 years now, looking at education innovation across the world, good practices, and you will see that there's a bit of a difference between pedagogy or teaching of school-going children and what we call andragogy, which is teaching adults. Adults learn very, very differently. So adults, for example, need to be involved in their planning and their learning. They want to have a stake in how they learn. They want to self-evaluate. They want to see for themselves that, in fact, I'm doing well. That you're telling me that, I got an A or that a good job may not mean something to them if they don't feel involved. Adults respond better to internal motivators. So they want to have an internal, intrinsic motivation to learn. So we have to find that reason why they want to improve or why they want to grow. Adults require immediate relevance. So if you're teaching them some theory and they can't actually apply this, that's not something that they will accept very well. So you will see that in the course of the presentation later, all of the framework and the tools are immediately applicable, that I'll be sharing with you are immediately applicable to you. Today, you could start using it. Adults prefer to learn by experience, learn by doing, learn by failing, and they like to be problem-centered as well. So these are just something to just keep in mind when we are working with adults, how really different it is. So some of these are freely available in this education innovation playbook that I put the link below. You can check out some of these things as well. So with adults, many other factors also do come into play before they can even start learning. So these are external factors, sort of organizational factors. In the course of our work supporting systems level change, we recognize that the external influences also have to be managed. We can't really view it in isolation. It's not a lab, right? It's real life. Job descriptions. Is this my job to be able to do this? Incentive design, organizational design, culture, processes and systems within the organization, leadership and management. These are all critical things that have to be addressed. And for today's session, I'm going to focus, now that we know that these are also important, I'm going to really focus on just the critical mindsets themselves, right? So how do we systematically change mindsets through beliefs and identity? This idea about human systems. For today, I'm going to go deeply into the idea of internal narratives or self-talk. And oftentimes it's the self-talk and narratives that will determine our motivations. And these are also the most difficult to change. We've developed a four-phase framework to systematically change the mindsets and self-beliefs. And this is something you can do for your colleagues, you can do for your reports, you can do for your students, you can do for yourself as well. All right? The general idea is to be able to build awareness around the 5 core character qualities that we mentioned earlier. First, we'll have to identify what the core belief systems are of any individual. Then we will have to link this to their personal sense of identity, their self-identity. Lasting change needs to start from here, inside out, coming from within, based on your identity, what your view is of the world, and then your identity. Once we have done that, life is easier. We will offer many illustrations of dominant strategies that we can take to intervene, as well as practical examples or tools that we can. Is essentially a lot of questions and reflections to help people be able to swap and moderate their beliefs and systems and mindsets. So those are tactics that we will come to. So the next 5 slides will really cover, for each of the 5 character qualities, how we work through beliefs, identity, strategy, and tactics. Let's start with the first one. Before that, we should also note that many of these character qualities, although I'm going to talk about them individually in sequence, many of these are formed through life experiences, and they can work in tandem with each other. So, or sometimes they can even work against each other. So to keep things straightforward, we will just focus on them for today on a standalone basis, but I just wanted to just pinpoint that actually many of these things can be mutually reinforcing as well. Curiosity. We start first by identifying what is an individual's core philosophy. What do they think about life? What do they understand and think about in the world, right? And we will do this through someone's self-talk. Sometimes there are reflections, sometimes there are grumbles, and we want to be able to sense-make what is this person's view of the world, his sense-making of the world. What do you most want out of life? Are they seeking relevance, seeking to be purposeful? Are they seeking pleasure, for example? So, for example, there's one sense-making, right? People who really just want to find purpose in their life, find relevance in their life. So their belief system, they might say words like, life has to have purpose, we have to do this, it's important, life is short, make the most of it, things like that. And for them, they will infuse it into an identity to say that my purpose is to be able to help others, so I feel useful doing so. If you can find these two, that in fact there is a greater purpose of what they do, then the dominant strategy becomes easier. It's really about forming the linkages between learning, and if you can be curious about more things, you want to learn more things. If you can learn more things, you'll be able to help more people, and therefore you fulfill a greater purpose. So you see this bridge that we are trying to form here. And the tactic, for example, to be able to do this, we could work through with them to understand what do they feel strongly about, what angers you, how do you enjoy spending time, what do you like to think about when you're free, what matters most to you, what do you dislike most about your last job or your last project, what fires you up to take action. So that's the first step, to be able to understand what their purpose is. We can use tools like a purpose framework. You can look it up to elicit your highest beliefs and your values. There's also a nice Ikigai framework, which is really about figuring out what is it that you love to do, what you are good at, something that the world needs and is willing to pay you for. And then the idea is to try many things out to be able to figure out this. Right? So this is sort of the easier one. Now, what if instead your fundamental belief, your highest belief really is about, life is short, let's just enjoy ourselves, let's party hard. Life is about just making the most of having the most fun, for example. There are people whose worldviews are this way. The bridge here is therefore to be able to help them see that in order to maximize their enjoyment, they also have to create value. If I had, for example, more resources, then I can have more chance to enjoy. I have more time, for example, to enjoy. So how do you need to create value to get value out of it so you can enjoy the most? And then we go back into the similar strategy of learning more so you can use knowledge to create value. And then after that, to effect this, we could help them form what we call a hierarchy of goals to see that this is your greatest goal. What's the sort of secondary goal that will give that, right? So for example, if my greatest goal is, sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes we say my greatest goal is to say, drive a supercar, for example. I want to drive a supercar. But actually above this, there's actually an even greater goal, which is I want to feel maybe important, I want to feel successful, right? Or if your greatest goal is I want financial security, I want to be rich, for example. Actually, there's a greater goal there, which is I want to maybe feel confident, I want to feel powerful, for example, or I want to feel like I don't have to ask people for favors, or I want to feel helpful to other people. So there's actually sometimes a even super ordinate goal above what people might think is their favorite goal. And then, below this, if I want to, let's say, make a lot of money, for example, then it comes into a few different goals. Okay, I have to save, I have to invest, I have to get passive income, and so on. And then below that is, okay, I have to get promoted, I have to get certain savings, I have to get a job in the first place. And then below that, it's, okay, I have to work hard, I have to apply, I have to practice my job interviews, I have to study, for example, to get this certificate. So, and then this way, this this hierarchy of goals will work very well. So that's a little bit about life planning, and for another category of people, life is about enjoying yourself. But for this person, actually, his enjoyment comes from learning and stimuli. For example, you must have some friends who, of your, say, 500 friends that you have on Facebook, there are probably 10 people who are the ones who are constantly posting many things. Most of us have something like that. And for these are sensory seekers, right? So people who, by intrinsically learning, intrinsically exposing themselves, they are already getting a lot of exposure and joy out of it. For this one, the idea here is to see that, if you spend effort learning itself, you get pleasure out of it. And then the way that you can foster this, for example, is to give people tasters, get them to try many different things to see what they like, help them to indulge in a hobby. If you have a child, for example, who has an interest in, for example, my own child, for some reason, strangely, started catching lizards, and he had interest in lizards, and it's very weird for me and my wife, but we just decided to run with that. Maybe he'll be interested in entomology or something like that next time, right? So just run with it and see what we can do to support these hobbies. And there's also a interesting idea of flow states where you are doing something that's so interesting to you that you are quite good at. You feel a little bit of challenge, and because of that, time really flies. You're really enjoying yourself, and that's what we can also do to try to nurture this. So this is the first one about curiosity. I'm going to move a little bit faster so that we get a similar sense of how it could work across the other four key mindsets. Okay. The second one is really about taking initiative. When it comes to taking initiative as a character quality, a lot of people, to encourage people to take initiative in their lives, in their work, we found that one of the key issues is the link between cause and effect. So some people believe in external factors, randomness, fate, raw luck, and this can lead to different kinds of outcomes. So for these people, we have what they call a higher external locus of control, which is whenever something happens, you say, oh, I was just unlucky. Oh, no, I was just lucky. Something like that, this kind of language. And for these folks, actually, what we contrast with another set of folks, which are really that can see that, my inputs, my human cause leads to a human effects that I'm enjoying. So these are people with a more higher internal locus of control. The first group may internalize in their identity that, circumstances are not often in my control. What can I do about it? And here, the idea here, the strategy is to help them to instill or cultivate a higher internal locus of control, such as by understanding attribution errors. You are attributing it to luck, you're attributing it to somebody else's generosity, but actually, what was your own effort in here? Recognizing that in some situations they do have a choice, focusing on things that are within their control, seeking ideas such that they can expand on their options, so they can ask people, what else can I do here, so that they can take the best decisions possible. And when they do take successful decisions, to be able to celebrate success, so that they can see, oh, in fact, I was the one responsible for this kind of outcome. For those that already have a high internal locus of control, how do you, their sense of the world is, I control how my life turns out. How do you help them to see, in fact, what is it that they have been doing, and how do you help them to get even better decisions? They already have the right sort of frame of reference, so we help them to journal, to figure out what they have done, how did they, what was their rationale, what was their thinking, what was their decisions, what were the outcomes that they had created, and they can see over time that taking initiative systematically can lead to better outcomes. So they start with smaller wins, over time they challenge themselves with bigger goals, and they also start asking themselves, what are the personal standards in your life that you're willing to accept? The first step, of course, is you have to realize that, whatever you do, agency, whatever you do creates outcomes. So we want to create an agency that way. After that, if you know that these are the outcomes, we ask ourselves, are you satisfied, for example, with the way that your finances are now, with the way that your health is, the way that your relationships are, the way that your leisure and hobbies are right now? So we have to try to understand that, and this would be able to help them moderate their efforts so that they can get very different kinds of outcomes. Okay, let's move on to the next one on adaptability. In the face of any new development, some of you must have had friends who either instinctively see that the sky is falling, this is going to be a disaster. Others who may believe that, if you're talented, that's because you are born that way. So, if this is not for me, I'm not born this way with the talent, I can't possibly adapt. And yet, there are also people who seem to strive in change when they realize that change is the only constant. So what's the difference here? Within the first group, there are instinctive response is I won't benefit. And they think this way because our memory systems are selective. They would have a high recall of past life changes, some trauma, emotionally traumatic events, and they associate misfortune with any change. Any change will lead to misfortune. So a strategy could be to help them to more systematically take account of the past changes. Firstly, see if some of them were positive, some of them were negative, and then to work through the possible implications for them. Help them work some mental accounting out. We personalize the change into what they could do for them. We talk them through it. Use a cost benefit, for example, for the different options. The second group, we call them the fixed mindset group, right? This is from Carol Dweck, a Stanford psychologist. And for them, they can't see themselves doing this. This is not for me. I'm not the language you will sometimes hear is, I can't dance. I'm not the creative sort. I'm not a natural presenter. I'm not a born leader, this kind of language, okay? So the challenge here is that their self-image is too salient, right? They have a very strong, fixed sense of self. This is who I am, I can't change. And stress happens when you put threat to this self-image. The idea here is to use the concept of experimentation. What experimentation? Why not you just give it a try? Just do it for fun. Just try lah, kind of idea to nurture a growth mindset. And tactics include encouraging failure. For example, at PNG, they have a heroic failure award. Intuit has a failure party, for example. Even in Singapore, the Hub Singapore, they have this word that I can't repeat. It's like a something up parties, right? Where they celebrate all their failures, and that's really critical. Stanford, the Stanford area, the Bay Area is so successful in their startups, also because their entire culture of that community is really about celebrating failure. And valuing effort over outcomes is also very important, such as in performance appraisals. And one of the things that I like very much myself is in this high school in Chicago, for students who have not been able to graduate, they don't get an F mark. What the teacher writes is not yet, right? So this is what I found to be very powerful, because that spurs momentum to say, yes, it pushes me forward to say, I could achieve it one day. And the third group, for which they recognize that change is the only constant, we find that they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to evolve. And the idea here is just to be able to reframe and to help them internalize new identities. You could be a chef, you could be a dancer, you could be a whatever. So how do you see a new opportunity as a way to reimagine your new self? So role playing, for example, is a nice tool that you could do in this area. When it comes to grit, which is we mentioned about not giving up this character quality, closely linked to resilience, associated with the ability to cope with adversity. One way that some people see is that the human condition is tough, right? Life is hard, for example. And 2,000 years ago already, there was a philosophy, a Stoic philosophy, that nowadays is becoming very popular again. Is about accepting the realities of life and dealing with it, managing your own expectations, and realizing that life, in a way, will still go on. There's another category of people who can do very well with managing resilience, is people who believe in survival of the fittest, right? Their worldview here is that, and what they internalize for themselves is that I have to be competitive, right? I have to build up my reserves. So for this group of people, the idea is to be able to condition them for adversity. And we can do this from young. We can do this to get people to be used to failing, for example, and getting feedback even though they fail on small wins. So they know that they're growing, they know that they are doing better. If we can apportion out tasks, for example, to help people experience progress, we get them encouraging feedback, it will nurture grit. And people will want to do even better next time. They can, because they're competitive, they can look around and see, if she can do it, I can probably do it as well. So this is also something that we find to be quite helpful. A variation on this belief is that life is hard, is that life is meant to bring out the best in you. The test of life will bring out the best in you. So people who subscribe to this identity have this sense of self-growth, self-efficacy. They want to develop, they want to grow. And the idea here is, how do you help them to, in a bad situation, reassume responsibility and control in their lives? So for example, you can help them to reframe, okay, what could you do out of this? Is there purpose for you to be found out of this? And what I found is that some of the people that I've met who have had to deal with unspeakable life tragedies, a lot of time they are able to move on, they're able to live on, because they have found purpose to say, oh, if I lost somebody I love, for example, this can be the basis for me to push out a cause for this issue, right? And help many other people that way. So this way of finding purpose, for example, to be an inspiration to other people, for example, to feel grateful for what you already have, for example, would be ways to deal with this. Leadership. Now, leadership is one of these, we've covered a little bit about this before. And in an age where we lionize our business leaders and our political leaders, and sometimes our Hollywood leaders as well, celebrities, a common belief is that people are natural born leaders. And this is a challenging belief. This is an issue, right, that is holding people back from assuming leadership in the first place. To start developing a personal sense of identity that I too can behave like a leader, a dominant strategy is to use reflective questions, right, to help you see that you can possibly be a leader. For example, a question such as, what was a crucible moment pushing you outside your comfort zone to help see that actually you can overcome something uncomfortable to take on a new identity? Another question could be to ask, can you describe a formative leadership experience for me? Now, the person may not have thought of this before. They may not even have had been a formative leadership perspective in their mind. They don't see themselves that way. But if they think about it, actually, in their capacity as in the school, at home as a sibling, for example, in a volunteer capacity, there were probably many opportunities for micro acts of leadership or micro leadership. And people are sometimes reluctant to take on this risk of leadership because they see that it's a choice that has to be made, and the consequence is too strong. For example, when you want to lead, people don't follow, and that's a challenge as well. So how do you help them to overcome the risk of leadership? The idea here is to see that, in fact, again, it's about agency, that only if you did something, you can influence the outcome that you desire, and that's so important to you. And to help them realize that, we ask them questions, help them reflect on, what was a situation, what is a topic for which you are most willing to take a risk that can change your future? What are you willing to fight for? What if it's your children on the line? Are you willing to fight for that, for example, right? What if it's your job on the line? How badly do you want this? And the idea here is to be able to cultivate a belief that leadership actually can get better with practice. People who don't see themselves as a leader may not have internalized this identity. And how do you help them discover a new leadership style, right? That in fact they can be a leader. What kind of leader can they be? And we ask them questions like, who is a leader that you admire? Which is a style that you really look up to. And we do 360 feedback. We get people to give feedback on them to say, hey, I really appreciated when you stepped up that day to protect me. And I think you're such a good leader. That kind of reinforcement, I think, is also extremely powerful. There's as we're talking through some of these individual aspects, many of you might be wondering, on an organizational larger scale, how can this apply? It does. Organizations are also made out of people. They have enduring beliefs and identities, and they can take the form of stories. They can take the form of unsaid practices or SOPs. And we found that even there's a notion of organizational self-esteem. It can come in a culture of self-determination or purpose, or it can come as an external brand, or it can come through some of the words that people use. For example, some people you might listen to, and we listen very carefully to these things. No one in our industry does this, right? If you hear something like that. Oh, that company A, it got lucky again. That's too much for us to bite off. Who knew the market will work this way? Let's wait and see how the competition reacts. When you hear words this way, you should by now already be able to get a sense, what are some of the beliefs, underlying limitations, and some of the strategies that we can implement as well. To do these things at scale, we can, of course, run focus groups across, we've done this across 2,000 person organizations. So large scale workshops, but individually they're doing pet work, for example. You can do career conversations. We can have peer mentoring programs, leadership development sessions. We can appoint champions. We can have challenges. So there are many ways that we can scale this kind of knowledge as well. To conclude, you will see that the 5 character qualities are really a function of individual and organizational beliefs and self-image. Across all 5 qualities, what is in common is that we firstly have to be convinced factually, but also emotionally for ourselves, that all these qualities can be developed, and we ourselves start embracing this growth mindset idea. We practice at being sensitive in our self-talk, right? What is the messages we're telling ourselves? We use some of and careful as well, not only sensitive. We use some of the strategies and tactics that we have outlined to become a master of our own self-thinking, and also that of the people around us, and determinants of our own identity. What kind of person do I want to be? We systematically map the links between the small steps you can take and the larger steps, larger life goals that you have. We focus on controlling what you can and start small and build good habits, choosing the most powerful emotions and the most powerful narratives for yourself. I'm confident that all of you will find that you and your teams steadily possessing these 5 qualities over time. In the past, it might have seemed impossible, but with these mindsets, all of us can really stay competitive and thrive in the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin, for the great sharing. We'll now take questions from the audience. So I think before we take for questions from the audience and for our audience to get their thoughts together and ask you some questions, I have some burning questions on my end as well, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that so building this whole mindset, new mindset for change, right? It's like there's something for everyone to do, right? There's a part that everybody plays, right? For the enterprises or organizations, you need to embrace failures, right? As a culture, right? So that they, people in general have the environment to fail safely and create better things, right? For the individuals, they need to know internally what drives them to move forward. And then of course for our training providers, for IHLs, they need to think of new ways, right, to engage the adult learner who is very much different from students, right, who are still in the pre-employment training, right? So how long do you think, right, these mindsets or these 5 qualities need to take, right, to form? Right? Yeah.
That's a great question. There's some work done from social psychologists that show that habit formation typically takes 66 days to form, right? 66 days. There's a range, of course. Different people have different ability to adapt, different life situation that they're in. And of course, the issue is also different. How far they are from the kind of mindset that we want is also different. So of course, there's a range. The range can be, I've seen some data from as little as maybe a week to 270 over days, right? So there is a range, but classically, typically most of the time, within 66 days, your body starts adapting to things. I'll share one personal story with all of you. For example, I tried to get healthier these days, and it could be about let's say losing weight, for example, or exercising, for example. Let's just talk about exercising, and what I do is there's one of the motivational speakers in Singapore that I'm friends with, Steve Thaddeus and Thaddeus Lawrence, I think, and what he says is that he does these ultra marathons across deserts and things like that. What he says that I thought is nice to repeat here is, when we asked him which is the most difficult race, which is the most difficult part to motivate yourself, he says the first 5 steps that you take to your shoe cabinet so you can put on your shoes, that's the most difficult part. If you just make those 5 steps and you put on your shoes, you get into the routine and off you go, right? And you finish your circuit. So for me and for those that we work with, what we try to do is that, across a 2-month period, we just take everything we can. We use peer pressure, we use declarations, we use habit for we make them work on their schedules. We plan it out such that their work plan and put into the schedules and things like that, such that at least for 2 months they are doing it every day. If they are doing it every day over 2 months, habit starts to form. Your brain starts to change. There's this idea about neuroplasticity that actually the linkages across your neurons actually can change the more you do it. And across 2 months, you start to feel that, oh, it's not such a pain. I'm used to it. Routine sets in. So I would say 2 months is a good time.
Right. So we have a question from Darren. Is this related to the Maslow hierarchy of needs? Or which part of it? Or do we need to does the organizations or even all parties need to look at it, or is it just one individual? So yeah.
Absolutely, that's a very interesting question. So mostly Maslow's hierarchy is used to talk about individual needs and how do we move up towards self-actualization, for example. It's interesting because if you look at the corporate world, many companies have also jumped up. And by right, the Maslow's hierarchy you have to fulfill your, say, social needs first or your security needs first, and then you go up to things like contributing and self-actualization. But even in this age, what we're seeing is that even though companies may not all be super secure given all the disruptions happening globally, many of them are still jumping up to saying we are a company of purpose, right? So especially as our civilization in a way evolves and all of us become our very basic needs of bread and butter become maybe a bit less critical for many of us, actually it becomes increasingly important. So many of the things that we talk about here around mindsets also appeal to a greater purpose. And I guess it makes me think also because when we are talking about, look, you should be a leader, you should be a purpose. Actually, this also very nicely fuses your greatest ideals and aspirations for yourself in a nice bridge with your immediate practical bread and butter issues. If I wanted to solve my bread and butter issues, if I just got retrenched, for example, realizing that I have a hierarchy of goals and I'm trying to work this way up actually can help me also to solve my immediate problems as well. Gives me energy, gives me focus, gives me motivation to want to do what I'm doing now. So I would say it is really quite related. I like the question also because it applies to both individuals and corporations as well.
Right. I think this ties in with Kelly's question on how then can we, find our superordinate goals. Most people will have. I can tell you like, oh, I'm aiming for this to live in this house, for example, right, or to own this supercar, right? But how then can we work on getting to know what we actually are looking for?
Yeah. It's a fantastic question. We talked earlier about trying out different things, reflecting, for example. But one of the things that personally, maybe I'll just share a personal story. When I was in the sort of earlier stages of my career, it was always about material pursuits, job titles, the kind of house you want, the places that you might travel to, and so on and so forth. And like everybody else, we work very hard and we try to acquire some of these things. And many of you these days, e-commerce is very popular, and it might also seem the same. You buy something on Lazada or somewhere, and you by the time you bought it, it seems like maybe your life will change. You arrive, you unpack it, okay, it's this thing. Okay. Most of the time it's like that, right? Job titles is just a piece of paper on your business card. Really, it's not really material. Your bank account is just a digital, how many zeros you have there. It may not be so material, but it's very difficult for me to just say and for someone to just subscribe to that. You have to really experience it yourself. I would say perhaps one of the ways is you talk to people. So critical is introspection, right? Really think it through, challenge yourself. If I had this, so what? Why do I really want this? Ask yourself a few whys. If you imagine yourself, if I had it, would life be really different? Will you be driving a supercar, and then so where will you drive the supercar to, and what will you do with it, for example? And separately, to talk to people, right? People who have accomplished different parts of their life. What you will find, for example, reading, say, biographies of leaders, of billionaires, for example, is that after all these things are said and done, actually the critical things are still things like your family, your loved ones. There's a lot of literature on deathbed type regrets. Nobody ever regretted on their deathbed that they didn't have enough zeros in their bank account, right? So I think the idea, especially with stoicism, is to be able to just see forward and see for yourself. If on this track, if you had all these things, would you really be very, very happy or not?
Right. Okay, we have a question from To. So in a work environment, the supervisor and CEO are critical to workplace learning and growth.
Absolutely.
Would it be the case that managers need to be conversant with these critical skills in order that their staff are also driven to the desired types of learners and outcomes?
Absolutely.
How do you suggest learning of these skills be encouraged for persons with disabilities or learning challenges?
That's a great question as well. I can't remember that there's several motivational speakers who actually have they're born without or they got in some accident, for example, or things like that. There's a very nice story I was reading recently about this two stories. One of a lady who is very unfortunate. She got really battered, and she got her face dipped in the acid by her estranged ex-husband or something like that. It's really horrendous. And there's another lady who was a high-flying lawyer, but she got completely paralyzed. She couldn't even blink. She could blink, I think that's all she could do. But we would imagine that in their positions, it's very natural for them to feel super depressed and things like that. But in fact, empirically, what many of these studies show is that these guys are still moving on and coping with life. And those who thrive are those who even become, for example, motivational speakers, going out there to spread their message. Because, as I said before, they found purpose in sense making the tragedy or the misfortune that they had gone through. So I think to anybody, whether you are somebody who just recently had some disability, was affected by some disability, or people who are just doing perfectly well, perfectly healthy, perfectly wealthy, I think everybody still lives in their own world, in their headspace, and they will feel that their stresses are still the biggest stresses. So without doing any injustice to anyone's afflictions, I would say that everybody in their headspace can certainly do with some of these tools, some of these mindsets. And arguably, if your adversity is even greater, even more so do you need to have this. It could be sensitivity training. And seminars like this, for example, are tremendously helpful if you can spread the message for all managers to see that actually, and also educators, I would say, to see that it's not just about pushing knowledge and hoping or dangling the carrot and hoping that people will move, but really understanding actually what's going on inside in order for us to find the most effective levers to help them move themselves and not us to push something to them.
I think LC has a question on how to coach employees to develop the character, right? There's some of the employees are just contented and will not want to go out of the comfort zone. I think this is sort of related to what you have mentioned earlier, right? But if they do not want to learn, then we got to find out what is the driving force internally for them, right? So have deeper conversations, right, that managers need to have with the employees as well, right? Whether or not why is it that the person is not willing to learn in this sense, right? Maybe the career aspirations is not there, right? Or there's something else that is on their mind, right? Maybe something at home that really sort of like they want to focus on rather than doing or changing a mindset at work, for example, right? So we need to understand the individual a bit better. Right. Then how can we use so basically if we want to change a new mindset, like what you said earlier, for example, most of critical core skills actually can be learned, right, to help individuals nurture that kind of mindset that you have mentioned, right? Which are some of the critical core skills that you think will be able to help them build these new mindsets, given that the critical core skills are the skills to build skills?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So maybe I'll just go back a little bit to to the previous slide. So just give me a second. And in the meantime, I also just maybe like to make a very quick comment. I'm not sure if that was exactly the question, but what if employers can't in a way be bothered to do this? What if I think embedded in a thought like this is a certain kind of dependency mindset itself. I think it's important for us to point out where for me and for us as Singaporeans, it's very. I'm also cognizant that I'm talking to SkillsFuture. It's very easy for us to say, oh, government should do this, or my employer should do that. We sometimes, I think as Singaporeans, unfortunately, because I suppose government does a good job, we look too much to the government to do things, and we take away that agency from ourselves. So even if our employer is just not interested in our well-being, you yourself should be trying to figure out what this is for yourself so that you will grow. As an employer, if let's say you're under cost constraints, you just don't have time to do this. You know what easy in a way to do this is to work with people who themselves you can or try to recruit people, look for people who themselves already can find purpose. So you will do this through your interviews. When you are hiring, for example, you ask them, what do you feel strongly about? Name me a situation where you failed and what do you get out of that? What was the situation where you felt so strongly about it that you went against the grain, against everybody's advice, and you push ahead anyway? If you use questions like this, for example, I think it would help to also find people who are this way. Lastly, I think there's also the natural market factors. Now, if for you as an employer, you realize, I think most of us do as employers, that if our organizations are really driven by the capacity of our people, and if our people are naturally curious, naturally taking initiative, leading, taking on more responsibility, they are obviously going to create much more value for us. Now, if I'm pushing ahead because I know this, I'm investing hard in my employees to be able to have that, and my competitors are not, I will naturally be the business that does well. And if I was a very narrow-sighted, short-term kind of employer, and I'm not interested in doing this because it takes too much time, my competitors naturally will move ahead of me, and over time the market should work itself out. Now that we know that there's 21st century mindsets that I think all of us need to embrace. Coming to the question of critical core skills, actually it's very relevant and it really overlaps as well. You will see, for example, that if you talk about leadership as an overall trait, leadership, if you decompose it, it will include elements like adaptability, which is here, influence, self-management, communication skills, collaboration skills. So really, we are talking about very similar concepts. And part of leadership, of course, if we think of leadership as a construct, as I said before, that you're just this natural born leader, that's not very helpful. But if you know that within the leadership X is the ability to persuade, the ability to influence, the ability to communicate, the ability to adapt and things like that, or think strategically and things like that, then actually it maps perfectly here. There are also a couple of other core skills, for example, around, let's say, I'm thinking about, let's say, grit, for example. So you will see that that's probably covered under self-management. It's one aspect of managing your emotions, managing your mindsets. And in fact, like we've been talking about today, managing your narratives also. What that's all part of self-management also. So I would say both really map quite closely together, and this I find to be quite a helpful thing to know the different aspects, operationalize the different aspects of what you can do once you figure out and you've worked out that mindset for yourself.
Okay, so maybe one more question from Ben. So Ben is asking whether you have any advice, right, to prevent the rubber band effect when we start getting back to our old habits and beliefs, right, after a while. Because we're all geared up and charged up after training or after a course that we attend, right? Then after a while we just go back to our comfort zone, right? Especially when the environment, surrounding, and culture is still not there yet. It's still the same old, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic question. I really love it. It's really tricky in all kinds of interventions. It's very tricky, right? So firstly, maybe what you were saying is that when you go back to work on Monday morning, you will be overwhelmed by the workload. You have a manager who's doing this or doing that. You have a lot of frustrations from people around you, and it's very natural to get back into the step of things. And that embedded in this mindset as well, if you notice, is a bit of, external factors will get the better of me, right? But if you sincerely believe that let me do things from inside out, let me just sort myself out first. I want to take agency first, right? Before I start looking at, yes, of course, there will always be adversity. Of course, many things will be pulling back, but you have to sort yourself out first. That's the core message, if you will. Now, how do you put this into action on a day-to-day basis? One of the things you could do, let's say you work through, you take this weekend, be action-oriented around it. Take this weekend, schedule in your calendar. If it's not scheduled, it does not happen, right? Put in your calendar, say, I owe it to myself to take this 2 hours for myself, to sit quietly away from my children, my kids, my parents, whatever it is, and just write down for myself, what's my greatest goal? What do I really feel good at doing? What should I lead? Just do many of us are in organizations. We do strategy plans for our organizations. Why not do a strategy plan for yourself, for your personal growth? Not just a career plan that you hope your manager will do for you. Do a strategy plan for your relationship. Do a strategy plan for your finances, right? And then based on this plan, what I would say is you can work with journals, for example. So you journal to say what progress. You set a bar for yourself, what progress. Some people, what they like to do, I don't have this myself, but what they like to do, I think could be helpful, is to put out a very big mission statement for yourself. Choose 1 or 2 of the goals. Don't change everything at a go, right? Do the plan out. Say for this 1 month or the next 60 days, this is what I want to be working on, right? And for me, it's going to be I want to start behaving with more acts of micro leadership, for example, right? So put that, or if I want to have, for example, let's say more grit, I start with something I feel very strongly about first. I don't want to jump over into learning Python immediately. If that's too far away from me, I want to start very small and say, maybe I just want to give up. My health is not so good. I cannot run a marathon immediately. I'll just go for a walk. Every day, I'll just walk for 15 minutes first. I see if I can stretch that, right? And then put that out there on a big piece of paper, put it in front of put it in your wallet. I have one in my wallet. Put it on your wall, your desk, right? And remind yourself this is what you want to do. And personalize it for yourself. I think that could be nice as well.
So we just have to, we owe it to ourselves to carry on and follow through with it, right? So just keep reminding ourselves, and like what Calvin said, push, take that 5 steps to the shoe cabinet, right? And then go and do it. Once you overcome the initial inertia, right? Then I think it's and make it a habit. I think you'll get easier and easier as time goes by. All right. Thank you so much, Calvin, for your insightful sharing. We've come to the end of this webinar session on the essential mindsets to navigate the future of work. So we're very, very grateful to have Calvin join us this morning to share his insights and address some of the questions posed. To all the webinar attendees, we hope that you had good takeaways from this session. We would like to encourage you to join us in our subsequent webinars, right, as we will be sharing on different topics every month. We appreciate it greatly if you also share with us your thoughts on the topics you'd like us to talk about. So before we close, I'd like to invite you to take a 2-minute survey. Your feedback, which will be kept confidential, is very important to us, and will help us improve the webinar experience for all of you in the future. Right, if you are interested to find out about the initiatives that SkillsFuture has, please refer to the link to the enterprise portal for jobs and skills on the screen. Right. Today's webinar session will also be hosted on my SkillsFuture and a portal, SSG LinkedIn page, and our YouTube channel. So the slides will be sent to you via email after this session. Right. Once again, my name is Jia Tao, and together with Matthew, we'd like to thank Calvin once again and Eden Strategy Institute for their support. Right.
Thanks so much,
Meanwhile,
everyone. Thank you.
stay safe and healthy, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.